Hello, everyone. Welcome to this new episode of Not So Nerdy Actuary. Today, I have with me Mr. Kulin Patel. He is a very senior actuary and someone whom I have been inspired by a lot. So if you talk to people and ask about one person who is an expert in a pension actuarial field, you will hear his name a lot. Welcome, Kulin. Welcome to the show. So can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Hey, great. Hi, Harsh, and great to come and chat with you and exchange thoughts and ideas. And thanks for the wonderful introduction. Great to see you again. And a little bit about myself for all your viewers and listeners. But I'm Kulin, a family guy, 2 kids, born and raised in London. Schooled in London, university in London. I did an economics degree and then was about to become a chartered accountant and then saw the errors of my ways just in time to switch to doing a postgrad in actuarial science at City University. Came out with a few exemptions, which was very useful at that time. And then started my professional career, which has taken me working in the UK for a number of years. I worked in Toronto, Canada for 3 years as well and moved there. And then back in the UK. And then since 2008 to 2019, I was largely based out in Asia, mostly in India, but then had wider responsibilities as well. So taken me around the world, this career and very exciting. Otherwise, people who know me, I love sort of interests around sports, anything that's kind of, cultural, whether it's theatre, music, films, that kind of stuff.
That's so inspiring. And I'm sure a lot of people will have an insight on the global perspective now, since you've traveled a lot around the world. So in your experience, what are a few important skills which an actuary needs to succeed in the profession? If you just jot down a few.
Yeah. Now I was thinking about this, and I get asked this a lot, and I found answers changing over the last maybe 15 years. About 15, 20 years ago, it was very, very much, what are the skills? And you start reeling off all the technical elements to it. People sort of, do you know this kind of models? Is this kind of technical interest? Do you know these rules, regulations? It's all very, I call it the hard stuff, the technical, tangible stuff. And I think that continues. What I do see, though, is that increasingly becoming kind of a prerequisite. That's like a given, for you to get into the field. So I call that the IQ pillar. Because the IQ is just a given of where you are and what you've achieved in terms of your studies and entry to the profession as such. I think the real development comes in my other 2 pillars that I have labeled over the years. The second pillar, Harsh, is the EQ. And that's what is the emotional quotient. And I've just summarized it as EQ, but really it's everything to do with those soft skills. And soft skills is a very, very wide area. I could probably talk for hours and hours just on that. But even just, a few little examples, written, verbal, and visual communication. Part of that communication is listening. The biggest skill that you could have in terms of growth as an individual in any professional life is most definitely listening. And then you've got, emotional intelligence. If you're going to actually lead people, you're going to take people with you, whether you're not a manager, leader, or whether you're just project team member. You're going to have to convince people. You're going to have to take people and you're going to have to implement. So the emotional intelligence to understand all those things, accept those things and adapt going forward is a huge thing. So these are some of the, elements. So that's sort of under the EQ pillar, those soft skills. And that's a lot of stuff that people have been focusing on over the last 10 years, I would say. And then the last one is a little add-on, but I call it the GQ. And that's a little bit of the glamour quotient. And yes, I like the magazine, but I think I don't mean it, that GQ means you just have to look fancy and wear expensive. It's not about that. It's more about the confidence. It's about being able to be confident in what you know and communicate that, so that whenever you walk into a room, there's the ability for you to have that sort of presence, and that then transcends into just beating some of those perceptions of then credibility about what you're actually going to say, what you're actually going to deliver on. Because at the end of the day, you need all three: IQ, EQ, and GQ. And so I think all of those sorts of things really will do help in this day and age. Whether people like the last one or not is debatable. I've had people that vehemently disagree with me. I say that you don't need to go all the way, but just an appreciation that how you carry yourself and you build your own personal brand is very important. So I just label it GQ, but actually what I mean is just having a persona and being able to transcend that persona for what you want to stand for.
That was a very comprehensive overview of the skills. But specifically, when you talk about communication skills, then as an entry-level actuary who just started working, they have spent most of their times studying for exams and preparing for exams. So, I mean, what advice would you give to those people to develop their communication skills while they are studying and working towards their exams?
So I think that's a really good question, because we do get used to just the technical, material, and exam writing and essays in exams are not really the best training for any communication anyway. So I think what are the best? I think, okay, if you look at written, write articles, simple, pure and simple. Write, and that doesn't mean they have to be published in the actuary magazines or stuff like that. Even if it's internal training to your team members is a form of written communication. Are you going to be able to write manuals, process manuals? That's a way of communication. Get involved in those kind of things. Because no matter what kind of written, any communication, but what that really force you to do in the written bit is really get you to force yourself to think, who is the audience that I need to write for? What is the kind of language I need to write for the purpose I am writing for? And what does the reader get out of it at the end? I'll go into that, what I mean by that getting out of it at the end in a little bit, because I have a sort of a point of view on that one. In other things which are more visual in nature, again, internally, training. Do your PowerPoint, do your presentations. Sorry, I was about to say PowerPoint, but please do not use PowerPoint if you do not need to. Just present, keep presenting, observe. So I think, those are some of the sort of very practical and tangible things that you should be doing, and looking to find ways in which you can get involved.
That would be very helpful for the audience, I'm sure. And can you enlighten the people who are watching this right now on the social security code in India, which is being just talked about? And I'm sure no one is a better person to talk about than you about this.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, quite a sort of a specific piece there, Harsh. So I know the audience for you might be more than India alone. So let me just put some of the things into context. So what is this code on social security? It's actually one code from 4 that the Indian government decided a few years ago to amalgamate hundreds of age-old laws that were basically all over the place, misaligned on many things when it comes to even simple things like a word definition would be different in different. So which one does the law follow? So this was an exercise to rationalize hundreds of labor laws in the country, and they boiled it down to 4 codes. Okay. And the 4 codes and all of that's all available on the internet. So one of those codes is the Social Security Code. Now that itself is an amalgamation of 9, I believe, employment laws that exist. Okay, so the first thing to realize is all of these codes, in the most part, they're nothing new. To start with, the premise is they're simply a summary and rationalized copy paste of the existing laws, but rationalized and made consistent. That's the first thing. Now, in terms of the Social Security Code, the main areas covered, I actually did a YouTube video of about 15 minutes, and I published it back last October. Maybe I'll send you the URL and you can put it in a link on your call, this one. But basically, it sets out an infrastructure of how government organizations will create this sort of social security structure. So there's going to be like a national board of social security. There's going to be regional, that sort of infrastructure is there. That's the first part. Second then goes into each of those different areas of social security. So it starts with the Provident Fund, there's maternity law, there's employment state health insurance law, the gratuity law. So these laws already exist, and they've just created chapters for each of those. And then there's chapters for usual sort of governance and things like that. The main ones that actuaries are going to be sort of interested in, which is the important bit, is firstly the fact that actually so the first one, let me just think about it. I've written 3 things down so I don't waffle too much. First thing is that if you go to the back, very interestingly, something that people will miss, but if you go to the very back of the code, I think it's clause 119, I think, it actually states that a valuation, these boards that are going to be created, will need to value these social security schemes, the liabilities and the assets. And so you can imagine where the word valuation comes in, to do it once every 3 years and all of that. It's kind of right up the actuary path. The second area that will be is there are multiple places where the social security boards that have been created will be able to create new schemes, will potentially also need experts to help them govern and monitor the finances of these social security schemes. And that's then another opportunity for actuaries. We can actually there's one of the social security board's requirements are to have a requisite external professional person from the area of finance and all of that, and social security, etc., on the advisory committee. So again, that's another opportunity. Getting a bit more micro in detail, you have the big elephant in the room, which is the fact that the definition of wages has been unified, and the way it's been unified across all these labor codes, the 4 labor codes, it's all going to be consistent. That may essentially increase liabilities from a gratuity standpoint for many, many companies. And a lot of actuaries have done a bit of work in the last few months and the last year looking at sort of, options there and what extent implications would have, including the Institute in India has done a bit of work there as well. And then, of course, because wages changes, then eligibility for PF and those contributions and things like that are there. So I would summarize it to say, good opportunities for actuaries to get involved in social security work and projects and expertise. The scope for getting involved in design of new schemes, whether it's for healthcare or anything else, old age, retirement, or anything else that might come along in the future. And then there's some tactical short-term things which are immediate, like the gratuity and the definition of wages. And there's a couple of other things with respect to gratuity, but that's kind of an overview.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive overview. I'll put down a link in the description below for the YouTube video, as well as to one blog, which I think you told me. So moving forward, there are a lot of, in the actuarial field, there are a lot of perceptions and a lot of you say stereotypes which are generally set by the people, or there must be at any profession, not just actuarial profession. So just talking about one of those which I hear on a
Yeah.
regular basis is that a lot of people says there is no scope of much growth as a pension actuary, and it is sort of dead. That's what a lot of people say.
Yeah.
And I know you've answered a part of it in the question before on how the opportunities would be there. But then because of this perception, there are a lot of people, when you talk to specifically entry level actuaries, where do you want to work? It's either life, non-life, or health. A very few of them would say that, okay, I want to be a pension actuary. So do you think, is it a problem that the people who are working as pension actuaries, there's a problem in marketing how pension actuaries work and how it's going on? I mean, is that a problem of communication on how pension actuarial work is? Or do you think that it's just a general perception which is formed because a lot of people who work in the same field generally are not able to tell how, what do you say, how important and how innovative an pension actuarial profession is? So, I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah. So I think they've often said, like you said, it's sort of, there's limited growth area as a an entry level actuary in this area. I think the growth is defined in many different ways, Harsh, on it, and my answer to this and advice to everybody is that don't go by, and I'm speaking specifically to the audience in India here, don't go by what is done today and what has been done in the past in the area of what is perceived to be a pensions actuary. And why? Because you may have seen that. However, the pensions world is probably the one that's going to last, does last the longest, because by the definition of people having to have an accumulation phase and then getting a payment phase, the time period is far, far longer, unless you sort of got a whole of life policy, but otherwise it's pretty much, all the way. Now, in terms of growth, what I would encourage people to look at and people to think about is growth in the following kind of dimensions, right? First, pensions, geographies, different countries and different regions in the world are going through similar journeys, but in very different ways, and they are all in different phases of that journey right now. So the opportunity, and this is the pension world I'm talking about, so the opportunity for actuaries to get involved in many dimensions to do with long-term income, right? I would even start removing the word pension and just calling it old age income security, because that can mean so many wider things and innovative things. So geographies is one, okay, which gives you growth and exposure as well as a lot of non-career, benefits. The second area I would say is that what the unique thing about being an actuary that works, I mean, let's call it pensions, but works in this sort of consulting field, is access to corporates, right? No insurance actuary can say that they work with and for the largest corporations in the world. How cool is it that you get involved with doing work, whatever that work is, for the largest brands in the planet? Okay, so given that, you can actually start extending yourself into domain areas within corporates as an actuary, because you have your clientele there and you have that appreciation. So whether it's finance, whether it is HR, the biggest one I've seen is HR. I spent, the 10 years that I was in India, yes, I was an actuary and all of that, but actually I was more an HR consultant than I was an actuary in many times. Right? Compensation, benefits, rewards, other elements of HR, strategy, all of that stuff. And the other area is investments. So, investment consulting, not just for the pension schemes, but then why not anything that matches long-term liabilities and with the corporates. The other growth area is globally in those large corporates. They've got huge legacy pension plans. And we have members of our own team that were sort of working with us in previous roles, who have now switched into being actuaries or just benefit consultants or HR consultants actually in those corporates. Right. That's again another opportunity of growth. And that then sort of broadens out. And the last one I'd say, Hirsch, is even for those who are in India, you will see and find somebody who works at one of the global centers of excellence for pensions or retirement benefits or whatever it happens to be. And you will see the world very differently, or this world of pensions very differently. Again, driven by rules, regulations, techniques, sophistication, maturity of those markets, etc. So there's so much area for growth, so much area for growth. And for the India piece, I just spoke about, it's not about pensions, it's about social security, it's about long-term care, long-term income replacement, and that has so many other avenues that you can get involved with.
That makes perfect sense. And since a lot of my audience is the Indian audience, and I speak to a lot of Indian people generally who are just trying to get into the actuarial world. So one of the general things which kind of make them go away from pension and not take it as an options is one, that while they are studying and while they're giving exams, the major portion of their exams, it teaches them about insurance and about how to apply it into insurance, be it life, non-life or other. But when it comes to pension, there's a very small part of it which teaches them about pensions. And there's a very small part which is applicable to pensions or what they have already read, because generally it's about life, non-life. So generally they think what they have read and what they are doing are two very different things. And that's what kind of makes them go away from the pension world. So, I mean, to those people who have this kind of thought, what would you like to tell those people about this specific thing?
So you mean those who are in the pensions area now, and then they don't see a translation of what they're studying to actually what they're working on?
Yeah, A, those, and B, those who are actually working in pensions and then trying to move to a life or a non-life or another field altogether, where they're like, okay, what we have done so far in last 3-4 years is kind of not applicable to what we are going towards. So that switch becomes kind of difficult from pensions to life, non-life, compared to switching from life to non-life. I mean, that's what a general perception is, what people think about. So
yeah, no, it's a really tough one, because the different industries in different places work very differently. And what I've experienced from my experience is sort of in India, I've seen that people are looking to change domain far more than I've seen elsewhere. In my time, early career, in the first 5-7 years of my career, the thought process, it just didn't happen, because I chose to get in. I didn't choose necessarily to get into pensions. I chose to get into consulting, and I chose something that I could talk business with corporates, but happened to then be in this field as well. So I'm one of those extremely rare people I've met that actually never applied to any traditional actuarial role when I was at university. I didn't want to. I needed something where I'm going to be presenting, I'm going to be with people, I'm going to be out to see clients, but I have a domain in something. And so that transition, I think, look at this. I think technical domain can be switched. I mean, even at my 25-year plus experience now, I'm starting to open and get involved in other domain areas which I haven't done in 25 years. So that's still possible for you. But why the skills that are transferable are back to those soft skills. Focus on those, because you will then be able to, if not today, it could be in 5 years, it could be in 10 years. Once you move in your career, you will actually be able to switch domains. If you focus on just what's the next model and what is the, you know, the models and programs and the legislation, you're going to get caught in a rut, because then if you know one thing, you're obviously someone's going to say you don't know the other. But if you're then learning, okay, I'm a business development person, I'm a trainer, I'm a client management person, I'm a communicator, I'm a team leader, I'm a, you know, that people after a certain level, it doesn't really matter what the domain is, because you'll be able to get people's help with that. And then you just need to do learning and reading and, you know, keep your professional development going on from a technical standpoint, but that shouldn't hinder you from switching. So my advice there would be, it's not all or nothing. And you learn so many things in the pensions area which you would not learn in other things. And I've seen it, you know, from speaking with other sort of people who have spent formative years in traditional roles, and seeing it when formative years have been spent having to get the courage to ring that client who doesn't know anything about your field whatsoever, and for you to try and explain stuff, or get settle the bills, or get paperwork done, and then try and explain answers to a non-technical audience. And surely that can only be a good thing in the long run of someone's career.
Thank you so much for that detailed answer. And I think we have spoken a lot of it in deep detail. But lastly, before going, like if you would want to summarize very quickly as to where you see the field of pensions as an actuary going towards, and any other advice you would give to the younger actuaries who are out there.
Okay. So in terms of pensions, Harsh, I think, or retirement or long-term income, I think maybe in the medium term, maybe 2 to 3 years, I see that in India specifically, hopefully, fingers crossed, there will be a bit more of a focus on sort of funding strategy. So you won't just do the liabilities, but there'll actually be not just accounting valuations. There might actually be a little bit more than that going forward, because I think the governance is going to eventually tighten up a little bit and require that. The second area is very clearly social security. You know, that's, you know, it's already being done, but the appreciation for that and the opportunities are really, really far reaching there. I think investment consulting is something that we need to evolve for the India actuaries in the pensions, retirement, corporate space. And there's good opportunities there. Again, rules, regulations have updated quite a lot, and clients really value that advice. And so people who really specialize in that and can do that and match the assets and the liabilities advice together, that's a very good one. And then lastly will be education to the employees themselves about pensions. You know, with all the national pension system, new areas of social security code and solutions going forward, it's going to be a big thing for people to get involved with. And then lastly, I think wrapping up from sort of more bigger picture, I'd say from your career and all of that, I think be patient. Be patient. Honestly, you get itchy feet quite often. One does, but be patient. You know, you just need to be disciplined, committed to it. Remember that it's more than technical. Don't be afraid to go out of your comfort zone. You know, even if it's in, you know, at work or volunteering or something in the profession, volunteer in things that are not to do with your core area. You know, just so that you get exposure, get out of your comfort zone. It will stand you in good stead. And keep building those soft skills, because many, many years from now, a lot of intelligent computers are going to be doing the things that we have been doing and we do today, including the sophisticated model building. And therefore, the only thing that remains is insight, the ability to analyze, and answer the big question of any stakeholder that you need to communicate to, whether it's the board for an insurance company, the CEO, or whether it's the CFO of a corporate that's got his pension or her pension numbers or whatever, is, and I'll just end with that, is always ask yourself, when we get bogged down in technical stuff, always think about this last two words I'm going to say. So what? And that will change the way you communicate, the way you realize why you're doing what you're doing, and also balance the need of your stakeholder with the time, energy, and context of what it is we're doing. And because real life is real life. We want to be 100% correct. We want to say certain things, but really at the end of the day, so what? We need to be able to explain why things are happening, what happens if we don't do stuff, what we have done. And so always ask that and be ready to, for any stakeholder communication, to our technical work, to end with the stakeholder communication to answer the question, so what?
That was a gem of an advice specifically at the end. So what? So I would leave my audience with the same. So what? So, thank you so much for your time, Kulin. It was amazing to have you on the show. So everyone, if you want to view more of this content, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the new episode of Not So Nerdy Actuary.
Thanks.